Because as we know, schools and what happens in the schools ripples out and it affects the cities, the counties. It hits your courtroom. It affects gentlemen when they're trying to hire people for their jobs. So we have a governance model here in Escambia County that's a little bit unusual. I would refer to it as a throwback model. We have an elected superintendent of schools, and statewide we tried to get it on the ballot with the Constitutional Revision Commission. We had it as one of the amendments, but it didn't make it. But it is on the ballot locally here in Escambia County, and I just wanted to get a sense from this table. My personal opinion is, out of 15,500 school districts around the country, there's just about a little over 100 that are left electing their superintendent. Most communities have figured out that it's much more beneficial to cast a wide net nationwide, find the specialists that you need to bring them in, pay them what you need to pay them, and get better results that way. And we found in the state of Florida, for instance, the lowest 10 performing school districts are run by these elected superintendents. So you can find someone to win an election, run your schools, but I would always like to find the very best guy in the country to run our schools, because we have some challenges in our schools. So I wanted to throw that out there as a discussion point. I know Escambia County has voted for this in the past, and they have always voted it down, but I certainly hope that this time around they'll look with a fresh perspective. And just wondered if you had any input on that, Mr. Studer.
No, I'll do a whole 2 days on this one. It's real interesting. I was in Milwaukee about a month ago. They asked me to be a keynote speaker at an educational conference for 68 of the top school districts in the United States of America. So it's a pretty hefty group. Baldrige winners, all sorts of winners. And just out of curiosity, I asked the person who put it on, out of the 68 school districts, how many here have elected superintendent of schools? She looked at me like, I didn't even know that
What's
existed
that?
anymore. And I think what happens is, if you're from here, you don't know that it's abnormal, because it's always been like that. But it's abnormal. I think Mississippi now has made a rule.
They have.
They passed a law that you can't have an elected superintendent of schools. Now, I know people say, well, we're poor and we can't pay a lot, so we're not going to get a real talented person. I don't agree with that. I know private people that would put a ton of money into the table to boost that salary to get the right person. Oh, they're only going to stay a couple of years and leave. The average superintendent only stays like 3.5 years. You're still going to be a lot better off for those 3.5 years than you would have. So I'm a huge believer. I want a superintendent who doesn't worry about re-election, doesn't worry about campaigning, doesn't worry about I have to be every social thing because I'm getting votes. I don't care if they'd ever go to a social thing, unless it's a parent social thing. I want a superintendent that every single day wakes up and says, how do I make this the best place for teachers to teach in, the best place for guidance counselors to work in, the best place for all the great, speech therapists and support people, and the best place for students. And I think we have to go to a selected, if we're going to ever be a great place, we've got to bite the bullet. But I pulled this, and I will tell you it's a heavy lift, because people say, oh, but that's what we've always had. But I like having that leverage. Well, and I talked to a school board member who will wish her way anonymous today, and she said, if they have a superintendent of schools that acts out right now, they can't do anything.
That's exactly right.
If you had a superintendent of schools, not that you want it, and there was a problem, you could remove that person. Now, and that person might be in charge of the investigation of themselves. So it gets really, really difficult. And so, the last couple things, I don't think in Tuscaloosa they would have gotten Nick Saban if they would have just said, let's find a local resident to be our coach. I know sometimes people in the school district who I respect will say, well, I like voting for the elected superintendent of schools. Sort of gives me a little leverage. And I had a principal say to me, well, I like having an elected superintendent of schools. So I said, then why don't we elect you? So I don't think that's a good idea. I want to be hired, So I think, and this has nothing to do with who the current superintendent is.
Right.
This has nothing to do with that.
Right.
It's can you count on every year going out and hoping, or every 4 years, a highly qualified, trained, skilled superintendent of schools will run to office. I could go out and I could have went to these 65 superintendents who are all stars, and I could have said, I'd like you to come to Pensacola. So I've been there, it's nice, I've been there on vacation, wouldn't mind it. I said, well, here's what you need to do. First, you need to quit your job and move here. Then you have to declare residency. Then you have to run for office, and you probably won't get elected because you're from out of town. So I think, though, it's a heavy lift. I told somebody today, if there's one thing that, I look at, you can't change a zillion things. So if I looked at if there's one thing I could change in the next 10 years that I think would have the most impact on the quality of life in Escambia County, it's moving from an elected superintendent of school to an appointed superintendent of school. So Nadia, I hope I wasn't too vague on how
No,
I feel.
I think we know where you stand on that. Thank you. Jack, do you have any thoughts on that? Because Jack is kind of like, he is an appointed administrator, if you will. He works at the pleasure of the board. And so how do you, what's your thoughts on that? I know you spent
Well-
time teaching at Florida State. You've done a lot of things in education.
Actually, I was at the Florida Center for Reading Research at Florida State. But I've seen it both ways, and I know that it's similar with principals. You know, one of the things that we found at different schools is, you know, it's all about the principal. And I think a lot of times, you know, there's a great book by Jim Collins, you know, where he had a research team and they were going to find out what made the 15 greatest corporations in America different. And they started off and they said, it's not about leadership. It's not about leadership. We're going to find out, you know, we're going to do all this empirical research. And at the end, they say, it's all about leadership.
It's all about
And it's
leadership.
about servant leader. So, you know, I think it's having the right person. Can you elect the right person, have the right person in charge? Certainly. I do think that certainly you as a county commissioner have much more control over me as an appointed administrator than if I were elected at large and you were elected district-wide.
Absolutely.
So I think there are, you know, pros and cons. I think if you make a mistake with your administrator, it's, you know, easy. I mean,
It's easy to
certainly my
fix.
contract comes up and the board says, hey, you're not cutting it, and or else you're doing a good job, but we want you to improve in these areas.
What about you, Gary? You served 6 years.
Well, I have my private thoughts. Unfortunately, as a judge, I'm not at liberty to give any opinion because they might think it might sway someone. So I would just say everybody needs to be educated about this, research about it, and make, you know, an intelligent decision is what I would say. Pay attention.
I will say, there's a group, and I hope I don't mess it up too much, but I have to validate this, but I'm pretty sure the Pensacola Young Professionals, who are very, very important in driving the Community Maritime Park vote, because they saw it as a big part of their future. I believe they're going to come out and support going to a selected superintendent of schools, and because they think it's really an important part of our future here.
Wow.
And it doesn't mean you'll get it right, but I think you have a better chance of getting it right. And again, this is nothing to say anything about the elected superintendent here. It's more of a philosophical thing.
Yeah.
Or what are our best odds? And I will say, I believe there's a number of private citizens. I think some of these better football coaches get a little bit of dollars from private communities.
They certainly do.
Because I think we need a great superintendent of schools, because this isn't an easy school district.
That's absolutely true. And I'll wrap it up. I spent 10 years on the school board, and this is an issue that's very important to me. And now as a county commissioner, I see it coming home to roost when I talk to folks that own small businesses, and they have people that are graduates, and they struggle, local graduates, some of them struggle composing a paragraph or doing basic arithmetic, and they come to me as a former school board member and they say, how did this happen? And I think the pressure, the political pressure to perform has led to a situation where we've lowered the bar, the participation trophy, if you will. And so I think it's critically important that you raise the bar. And when you do that, you're going to have fewer people graduating on time. And you got to have the courage and the will to say that that's okay, because when we give a diploma in Escambia County, Florida, it means something. It means that when I go to work for an HVAC company or a hotel company, I'm going to be able to do basic arithmetic. I'm not going to need a calculator to count change back from a 20. I'm going to be able to count it. And these things. And the politics, you mentioned the politics of it. I'd like to see a guy in Escambia County.
Or a lady.
Or a lady. Or equal opportunity. But I would like to see someone who's a specialist in social dysfunction, urban dysfunction, generational poverty. We have those issues here, and those folks are out there. You just got to go find them. You got to cast a wide net. You got to find the very best guy and bring him here. Someone with passion, experience, training, and someone who isn't beholden to some of the inside politics, inside baseball, if you will. You know, my cousin's uncle works here, so we got to do this. This principal's been here, and his uncle owns this company that contributes to my campaign. A lot of that happens. The nepotism, the patronage. We need an outside professional who is not going to be subject to those forces. And so I certainly hope, with Mr. Studer's support, Pensacola Young Professionals, I'll certainly be as vocal as I can be. We need a guy. We need the very best guy, not the very best guy.
Or a lady.
Or lady in Escambia County. I mean, I want to cast a wide net, and I certainly hope that people will be open-minded and look at this issue, because it's very important, very important. And
Well, one of the things I would tell you as a professional administrator,
Yes, sir.
politics is not my realm, my responsibility, you know.
Absolutely.
And I'm to stay out of politics, which makes it easier, I think, for the board sometimes.
Absolutely. So I look forward to it, but gentlemen, I appreciate your time, each and every one.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Studer, thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Appreciate
Gary,
everything
thanks
you
for
do.
coming. Jack, and we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for watching the Burgosh Bulletin. Look back in the next 3 months and we'll do another one. Thank you.